The massive warship Reckoning tore through the fabric of space, its sudden appearance sending ripples of panic across the Galactic Council's capital system. It hung there like a scar against the stars, its hull marked by the telltale burns and dents of countless battles fought and won. This was no diplomatic vessel. This was humanity's statement. Captain Han Ji-woo stood tall on the command deck, her weathered hands clasped behind her back. Through the viewport, she could see the Council's defense fleet scrambling into formation, a reaction she had anticipated. 200 years had passed since humans were forced from these stars, labeled as dangerously unpredictable after what had merely been a cultural misunderstanding. Council vessels approaching, Captain, reported Officer Kang, his fingers dancing, across the tactical display. They're keeping their weapons hot but not locked. Ji-woo nodded. Let them come. They remember enough about humans to be afraid. The Reckoning dwarfed the Council's largest ships. Its design followed no known conventional pattern. Sharp angles where curves should be, strange bulges housing, technologies no Council race had ever seen. The metal of its hull seemed to drink in the light of the system's sun rather than reflect it. They're hailing us, Captain, said Communications Officer Song. Her voice carried the tension they all felt. Many of the crew had grandparents who died during the Exodus, their stories of the Council's betrayal passed down like precious heirlooms. On screen, Ji-woo ordered. The face that appeared belonged to a Tellurian, blue-skinned, with 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern. Ji-woo recognized the species as one of the Council's founding races. Unidentified vessel, the Tellurian began, then faltered as recognition dawned. Human vessel. You are in restricted space. Your kind was exiled. 2 centuries ago, Ji-woo finished for him. I'm well aware, Council Representative. I am Captain Han Ji-woo of the Earth Warship Reckoning. The Tellurian's upper eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of distress among their kind. How did you bypass our sensor grid? Our defenses are outdated, Ji-woo cut in again. At least by our standards. Murmurs spread across the Reckoning's bridge. They had all sacrificed to reach this moment. 20 generations of humans had lived and died in the darkness beyond known space, fighting enemies these Council races couldn't even imagine. I request an audience with the full Galactic Council, Ji-woo stated. It wasn't really a request. The Tellurian seemed ready to object, but then paused as someone off-screen spoke to him. His 4 eyes widened as he received information, presumably about scans of the Reckoning. Your ship's power readings are impossible, he finally said. Officer Kim Do-hyun, the chief engineer, chuckled from his station. Should we tell him about the secondary reactors, Captain? Ji-woo allowed herself a small smile. The Council will be briefed on all relevant technological developments, Representative, once we meet face to face. The standoff lasted nearly an hour. Council ships maintained their distance while urgent communications bounced between their vessels. Throughout it all, the Reckoning remained still, a silent promise of what humanity had become in exile. Finally, the Tellurian returned to the screen. The Council will grant your audience, Captain Han. You may dock 1 shuttle at the Grand Assembly. You and 2 officers only. No weapons. I'll bring 1 weapon, Ji-woo countered. A simple reminder of what you cast away 200 years ago, before the Tellurian could object. Ji-woo nodded to Officer Song to end the transmission. Tactical Officer Park, Engineer Kim, you're with me, Ji-woo announced, striding toward the elevator. Officer Song, you have the bridge. The shuttle bay was quiet as they prepared to depart. Ji-woo paused before boarding, looking at the gathered crew members who had come to see them off. Today we're not just representing the Reckoning, she told them. We represent every human who died in exile, every child born never knowing the comfort of a sun-warmed planet. We represent humanity's will to survive. The shuttle journey to the Council station was tense. Through the viewport, Ji-woo watched the gleaming spires of the station grow larger, a stark contrast to the utilitarian design of human settlements. These races had known peace and abundance while her people scraped by on the edge of existence. The landing bay was a show of force. Council security troops lined the walls, their weapons not quite pointed at the shuttle, but ready to be raised in an instant. "They're scared," Officer Park noted as they prepared to disembark. "Good," said Engineer Kim. "They should be." Jiwoo adjusted the small case she carried. Inside was the weapon she had mentioned. Not a gun or bomb, but something far more devastating to the Council's pride. As the shuttle door opened and the three humans stepped onto Council ground for the first time in 2 centuries, Jiwoo felt the weight of history on her shoulders. The security troops stiffened as they approached, clearly unsettled by the humans' calm demeanor. A new Tellurian, this one wearing elaborate robes signifying high station, stepped forward. "Captain Han, the Council awaits. Though I must warn you, many question the wisdom of allowing humans to return even temporarily." Jiwoo looked the official straight in his 4 eyes. "When they hear what we've come to say, they'll question the wisdom of ever letting us leave." The journey to the Council chambers took them through gleaming hallways, where representatives of 24 species stared openly as they passed. Jiwoo walked with the confidence of someone who had faced far worse scrutiny than curious looks. "They've grown soft," Engineer Kim whispered. "Look at their technology. Barely advanced since our exile. While we evolved through necessity," Jiwoo replied quietly. "We'll see how they react to that." The doors to the Grand Assembly slid open, revealing a vast chamber with tiered seating arranged in a perfect circle. 27 seats for 27. Council races, each looking down at the speaking floor where Jiwoo and her officers now stood. "Captain Han Jiwoo of Earth," announced the Tellurian overseer. "Granted special audience with the Galactic Council." Jiwoo stepped forward, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She placed her case on the small table provided and looked up at the gathered representatives of the powers that had once sentenced her people to what they had expected would be extinction. 200 years ago, you cast us out," she began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. "Today, we return, not as supplicants but as saviors. Whether you deserve saving is another question entirely." Jiwoo stood before the Council, 27 pairs of alien eyes fixed upon her with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and in some cases, unmistakable contempt. The chamber remained silent after her opening statement, the Council members exchanging glances that spoke volumes about their discomfort. "You seem surprised to see us," Jiwoo continued, her voice steady. "Did you expect us to die quietly in the dark? To fade away like an embarrassing footnote in your grand history?" A Varaxian counselor leaned forward, the scales on his neck flaring with irritation. "We gave your kind a habitable system. More than generous for a species that nearly caused an interstellar incident." Jiwoo laughed, a short, harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. "Habitable? You gave us a dying star and 3 rocky planets with barely enough resources to sustain our generation ships. You expected us to wither and die?" She opened the case she had brought, removing a small projector which she placed on the floor. With a tap of her finger, it activated, casting a 3-dimensional map of uncharted space into the air above them, the vast, unknown regions beyond the Council's carefully maintained borders. "This is where we went after your generous system failed us," she said. "Into the places your explorers feared to chart." The hologram zoomed in on a cluster of stars that pulsed with an angry red light. 15 years after our exile, we encountered the void swarms here. Living darkness that consumes everything in its path. We lost 3 colony ships before we understood what we were facing. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The void swarms were considered a myth, a boogeyman story told to frighten young explorers away from the galactic rim. "You've never seen a void swarm up close," Engineer Kim said, stepping forward. "They move between stars faster than light, leaving nothing behind, not even dust." He manipulated the projection, showing footage that made even the most composed council members flinch, a black, shifting mass consuming an entire planet, breaking it down to its atomic components in minutes. "We learned to detect them," Kim continued, "then to predict their movements, eventually to repel them, each lesson bought with human lives." Jiwoo nodded to Officer Park, who stepped forward with his own data crystal. The hologram shifted again, showing a different region of space dominated by angular metallic ships. 23 years into exile, we encountered the hegemony, Park explained. Unlike the void swarms, they were intelligent, organized, and immediately hostile. The footage showed human ships, cobbled together from salvaged parts, desperately, fighting against sleek enemy vessels that outgunned them 10-1. The hegemony doesn't take prisoners, Jiwoo said quietly. They strip captured ships for resources, including organic material. My mother died in the Battle of the Crimson Nebula, along with 12,000 other humans. A Pelleran counselor raised a delicate, six-fingered hand. If what you say is true, how did you survive such forces? Your exile fleet consisted of only 50 ships, most of them civilian. We adapted, Kim said simply. After each encounter, we studied the wreckage, reverse-engineered what we could, improved on it. The hologram shifted again, showing human settlements carved into asteroids, hidden moon bases, and eventually, entire shipyards floating in the void between stars. We built our first true warship 35 years after exile, Jiwoo explained. By the 50th year, we had 12. Not enough to defeat the hegemony, but enough to establish a defensive perimeter around what had become our territory. Park manipulated the display again, zooming in on what appeared to be a research facility embedded in a small moon. 70 years after exile, we made our greatest breakthrough when studying hegemony power cores. The image showed humans in protective suits carefully dismantling alien technology, making adjustments, testing configurations that no council race had ever attempted. Your scientists claim subspace energy extraction is impossible, Jiwoo said, looking directly at the Tellurian High Counselor. They're wrong. The hegemony had been working on it for centuries. We perfected it in 2 decades. A murmur ran through the council. If humans had mastered subspace energy extraction, their power generation capabilities would be virtually limitless. But the hegemony and void swarms weren't the worst of it, Jiwoo continued, her voice dropping. The hologram shifted again, showing what looked like ripples in the fabric of space itself. 120 years after exile, we encountered them. The dark matter entities, Kim said, his voice somber. They exist partially in our dimension, partially in others. They don't consume matter like the void swarms. They convert it, changing the fundamental physical laws of reality and regions. They touch. The footage showed a human outpost slowly warping, the metal structures twisting into impossible shapes as the laws of physics themselves were rewritten. We lost entire colonies before we understood what was happening, Jiwoo said. The survivors were not the same people anymore. She paused, allowing the council to absorb the horror of what they were seeing. The chamber had grown deathly quiet. We fought them too, she continued after a moment. Found ways to detect their approach. Developed weapons that could affect beings existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Varaxian counselor who had spoken earlier leaned forward again. If these entities are as dangerous as you claim, where is your evidence that they are a threat to council space? Jiwoo exchanged a look with her officers before nodding to Park. He adjusted the hologram again, zooming out to show the entire galactic map. The dark matter entities are moving, she said simply. For the first time since we encountered them, they're moving in a coordinated pattern, toward council space. She pointed to several points on the map's edge, systems that fell under council protection. These outposts have already gone dark, she said. Your communications network hasn't registered it yet because the subspace relays were the first things affected. But they're gone. Every living thing, every structure, everything. A stunned silence fell over the chamber as the council members stared at the map, at the slow but inexorable movement of an enemy they had never known existed. This is why we've returned, Jiwoo said, her voice gentle now, almost sympathetic. Not for revenge, not to remind you of your mistake in exiling us, but because what's coming doesn't care about politics or old grudges. It will consume everything. You, us, every sentient species in this galaxy. She straightened her shoulders, looking at each council member in turn. We've spent 200 years learning how to survive in hell, she said, Now we're offering to teach you. The council chamber erupted in chaos after Jiwoo's revelation. Some representatives shouted denials, others demanded proof, while a few sat in stunned silence. The Tellurian High Counselor raised his four-fingered hands, calling for order. "These are extraordinary claims, Captain Han," he said when the noise finally subsided. "You expect us to believe that some invisible entities are consuming our outposts and only humans can stop them?" Jiwoo held his gaze steadily. "I don't expect you to believe anything. I expect you to verify our claims before it's too late." Nodded to Officer Park, who adjusted the holographic display. "3 council outposts have already gone dark," Park explained, highlighting systems at the edge of council space. Outpost Zeta 9, Kalhari Mining Station, and the Eridani Research Facility. A Nexian counselor with translucent skin that revealed the flowing of purple blood beneath stood abruptly. "Ridiculous. We received a supply confirmation from Eridani just last cycle." "No," Park said quietly. "You received an automated confirmation. Check your deep space monitoring arrays. There's been no actual communication from any of these outposts for over 30 standard days." The Nexian's skin flushed darker purple. "How would you know the status of our monitoring systems?" "Because we've been watching," Jiwoo said simply. "We've maintained stealth observation posts near council space for decades. Not for invasion, planning, for early warning." Engineer Kim stepped forward. "We knew that when the dark matter entities began to move, they would come through these regions first. We've been tracking their movement since they first appeared in the Denari cluster." The hologram shifted, showing a time-lapse of strange ripples moving through space, like waves on water. Where the waves passed, stars dimmed ever so slightly. "This is how they travel," Kim explained. "They disturb the fabric of space-time itself. By the time you can detect them with conventional sensors, it's too late." The Varaxian counselor hissed, his scaled face contorting in disbelief. "If these entities are so devastating, how have you survived them? Why should we trust creatures who return from exile with a warship unlike anything we've ever seen?" Jiwoo was about to answer when a sharp tone sounded from Park's datapad. He glanced down, his expression tightening. "Captain," he said, voice low but urgent, "long-range sensors are picking up a hyperspace disturbance. Large signature approaching rapidly." Jiwoo's posture changed instantly, shifting from diplomatic to alert. "Hegemony?" Park nodded grimly. "Signature matches their fleet patterns. Approximately 60 vessels, multiple classes." A shocked murmur ran through the council chamber. The hegemony was known to them only as a distant threat, a mysterious power that controlled several systems beyond their borders. They had never attacked council space directly. "How long?" Jiwoo asked. 11 minutes to system entry," Park replied. The Tellurian High Counselor stood, his blue skin paling to almost white. "This chamber has planetary defenses. We must evacuate to safety bunkers immediately." Jiwoo shook her head. "Your defenses aren't designed to handle the hegemony. Their ships can absorb conventional energy weapons, and their hull plating deflects kinetic projectiles." "Then what do you suggest, human?" the Varaxian demanded, fear making his voice harsh. "That we surrender to them, or to you?" "Neither," Jiwoo said calmly. She touched her wrist communicator. "Reckoning, this is the captain. Hegemony fleet incoming. Prepare for defensive engagement. Protect the council station at all costs." The voice of Officer Song came through clearly. "Understood, Captain. Reckoning is moving to intercept. Weapons and shields at maximum." The council members looked at each other in confusion. 1 human ship against 60 hegemony vessels? "Are you mad?" the Nexian counselor asked. "Your ship, impressive as it may be, cannot possibly put the Reckoning's sensor feed on the hologram." Jiwoo interrupted, speaking to Park. He quickly complied, and the chamber's display shifted to show a tactical view of the system. The Reckoning was moving away from the council station, positioning itself between the incoming threat and the planet. "Your planetary defense fleet should fall back to protect the civilian population centers," Jiwoo told the council. "The Reckoning will handle the hegemony vanguard." Before anyone could object, the hologram flickered as space itself seemed to tear open, Dark, angular ships poured through the rift, each one a nightmare of sharp edges and predatory design. The lead vessel was massive, nearly twice the size of the Reckoning. "Hegemony dreadnought," Kim muttered. "They're not taking chances." The council chamber went silent as everyone watched the hologram. The Hegemony fleet formed up with mechanical precision, while the lone human ship floated before them, seemingly small and vulnerable in comparison. "The Hegemony doesn't communicate before attacking," Jiwoo explained to the stunned council. "They consider all other life forms to be resources, not equals." As if to prove her point, the Hegemony ships launched their first salvo, hundreds of energy projectiles streaking toward the Reckoning. The council members gasped collectively, certain they were about to witness the destruction of the human vessel. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The Reckoning's hull seemed to ripple, and then, impossibly, the ship was no longer where it had been. It had moved faster than the tracking system could follow, the energy weapons passing harmlessly through empty space. "Subspace jump drive," Kim said with a hint of pride. "Short range, but effective." The Reckoning reappeared behind the Hegemony's flank and immediately opened fire. But these weren't conventional weapons. Streams of particles that seemed to bend and twist through space struck the enemy vessels. Where they hit, the Hegemony ship's hulls simply dissolved. "Dimensional phase disruptors," Park explained. "Developed from our encounters with the dark matter entities. The weapons shift matter partially into another dimension, causing molecular instability." The council watched in awe as the single human ship executed a series of maneuvers that should have been physically impossible. The Reckoning seemed to anticipate the Hegemony's tactics, always one step ahead. "How are you doing this?" the Tellurian High Counselor whispered. 200 years of fighting for survival," Jiwoo replied quietly. "We've faced the Hegemony more times than I can count. We know their patterns, their weaknesses, and we've developed technologies specifically to counter them." The Hegemony fleet attempted to surround the Reckoning, but the human ship's point defense systems activated. Thousands of tiny drones swarmed out, each carrying a miniature version of the phase disruptors. They targeted the smaller Hegemony vessels, tearing through their hulls with frightening efficiency. In less than 5 minutes, a third of the Hegemony fleet had been neutralized. The remainder began to pull back, reforming their lines. "They're adapting," Park noted, "changing their shield frequencies." "So will we," Jiwoo responded. She touched her communicator again. "Reckoning, initiate Protocol Omega. Let's show the Council what humans can really do." On the hologram, the Reckoning's hull began to glow with an eerie blue light. Energy readings spiked off the charts, causing the Council's monitoring systems to flash warnings. "What is happening?" the Varaxian demanded. "We're releasing the limiters on our subspace energy tap," Kim explained. "At full capacity, we can channel enough power to, well, you'll see." The Reckoning suddenly accelerated, moving so fast it left after images on the holographic display. It cut through the heart of the Hegemony formation, its hull still glowing that strange blue. Wherever it passed, enemy ships simply shut down, their systems going dark as if someone had flipped a switch. "Subspace energy inversion," Kim said. "It temporarily negates all power generation within its field. Their ships are running on emergency systems only." The Hegemony dreadnought, realizing the threat, turned to flee. But the Reckoning was faster, intercepting the massive vessel before it could reach the hyperspace jump point. "We can't let it escape," Jiwoo explained to the Council. "If it reports back about your defenses, or worse, about us being here, they'll send their main fleet." The Reckoning's weapons concentrated on the dreadnought, methodically disabling its engines, weapons, and finally its power core. In less than 15 minutes after their arrival, the entire Hegemony attack force had been neutralized. The council chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. One human ship had just defeated a force that would have overwhelmed the entire council defense fleet. "Now," Jiwoo said, turning back to face the stunned council, "are you ready to discuss the real threat?" The council chambers had been transformed in the hours following the Hegemony attack. What had once been a formal meeting hall now resembled a war room. Holograms flickered across hastily installed projection tables, and representatives from various council defense forces huddled in small groups, speaking in urgent whispers. Jiwoo watched it all with a measured gaze. The demonstration of the Reckoning's capabilities had accomplished what her words alone could not. It had made the council truly afraid. Captain Han, the Tellurian High Counselor, approached, his four eyes blinking rapidly in sequence, a sign of extreme stress in his species. Your crew has been granted temporary diplomatic status. The full council has voted to hear your intelligence. Briefing? Jiwoo nodded. We'll need suitable equipment for Dr. Choi. She leads our research into the dark matter entities. At her words, the airlock doors slid open, and Dr. Choi Yuna entered, carrying several data cores under one arm. Her face bore a distinctive scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw, the mark of someone who had survived a close encounter with the very beings she studied. Dr. Choi, Jiwoo greeted her with a respectful nod. The council is ready for your presentation. As ready as anyone can be, Yuna replied, her voice soft but clear. She approached the central holographic array, dismissing the current strategic displays with a wave of her hand. I'll need full-spectrum projection capabilities, including subspace frequency visualization. A council technician looked confused. Madam, we don't have— Use this, Engineer Kim interrupted, handing over a small device. It'll upgrade your systems temporarily. As the technicians worked to integrate the human technology, Lee Min-ho, the Reckoning's chief strategist, entered the chamber. His uniform bore the insignia of 17 major campaigns, each representing a battle where humanity had faced extinction and survived. Status report from the Reckoning, Min-ho said quietly to Jiwoo. The hegemony vessels have been secured. No survivors, as expected. They triggered their self-destruct protocols rather than be captured. Jiwoo nodded grimly. Salvage. What technology we can. The Council's engineers might benefit from studying their weapon systems. The Varaxian counselor, who had been listening nearby, approached with a scowl. You've clearly been preparing for this moment for decades, human. Why return now? Why help those who cast you out? Before Jiwoo could answer, Min-ho stepped forward. Because the dark matter entities don't care about your borders or your politics. They'll consume everything, you, us, the hegemony. Everything. How can we trust you? The Varaxian pressed. Your ship just destroyed 60 hegemony vessels without assistance. You could easily turn those weapons on the Council. Jiwoo stared at him silently for a moment, then slowly removed her uniform jacket. Underneath, her arms were covered in burn scars, distinctive patterns that anyone who had studied xenobiology would recognize as hegemony energy weapon burns. She turned, revealing her back, which bore even more extensive scarring. Balaxis campaign, she said quietly. 8 years ago, I led a ground team to rescue colonists from a research outpost. The hegemony had already landed troops. She put her jacket back on. Every human who survived exile bears scars, counselor. We learned long ago that fighting alone means dying alone. The Varaxian stepped back, momentarily silenced. The presentation is ready, Captain, Dr. Choi called out. The chamber's lights dimmed automatically as the holographic display activated, filling the space with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. What you're seeing represents 200 years of human exploration and intelligence gathering, Yuna explained. Regions beyond Council space glowed with detailed information. Star systems, navigational hazards, alien territories. The red markers indicate confirmed dark matter entity activity. There were hundreds of red markers forming a pattern that even the most tactically ignorant could recognize. They were moving inward, toward the heart of the galaxy, toward Council space. The entities were first encountered by a human mining expedition in the Cygnus Void. Yuna continued. Initially, we believed them to be a natural phenomenon, unusual energy patterns affecting local space-time. We were wrong. The hologram zoomed in on one of the markers, showing surveillance footage from a human outpost. The image showed normal operations until a barely perceptible ripple passed through the station. Suddenly, the metal walls began to warp and twist, folding in on themselves in ways that defied physics. The people inside? Sorry, Yuna said, cutting the footage. What happens to organic life forms exposed to the entities is difficult to watch. A Pelleran counselor raised a delicate hand. What exactly are these entities? Are they sentient? They're conscious, yes, Yuna replied, but not in a way we can easily comprehend. They exist partially in our dimension and partially in others. Our reality, our physics, is merely a resource to them. Minho stepped forward. Think of them as dimensional miners. They harvest the fundamental forces of our universe to fuel whatever exists in their home dimension. But they can be stopped, Kim added quickly, seeing the growing horror on the council members' faces. We've developed weapons that can affect them, dimensional anchors that force them fully into our reality, making them vulnerable to conventional attacks. At great cost, Jiwoo said quietly. The room turned to look at her. Every victory against the entities has come with a terrible price. Entire ships, crews, colonies, sacrificed to learn their weaknesses. The hologram shifted again, showing the reckoning engaging with a distortion in space. A battle that looked more like a dance of light and shadow than conventional warfare. This footage is from 3 years ago, Minho explained. A single entity approached the Arcturus colony. The reckoning intercepted it, using prototype dimensional phasers to force it into our reality. The footage showed beams of strange, twisting energy striking the distortion. Gradually, something began to take shape, a form that seemed to fold in on itself continually, angles and curves that the mind couldn't quite process. We destroyed it, Jiwoo said, but not before it damaged the reckoning's port side and killed 37 of my crew. The council chamber was silent as the implications sank in. If one entity could do that much damage to humanity's most advanced warship, what would happen when they arrived in force? The entities are coordinating now, Yuna continued after a moment. For the first time since we discovered them, they're moving with purpose, following specific paths. We believe they've detected something in this region of space that they consider especially valuable. The Council core systems sit at a unique subspace confluence, Kim explained. Energy patterns here are different from anywhere else in the galaxy. Your ancestors chose these worlds for their capitals because they felt special. They were right, just not for the reasons they thought. Minho activated a tactical overlay on the hologram. Based on their current movement patterns, we project entity incursion into Council space within 60 standard days. Their primary targets will likely be your major population centers and energy production facilities. Which is why we need to establish a joint defense plan immediately, Jiwoo added. The Reckoning is just one ship. Powerful, yes, but even we can't be everywhere at once. The Tellurian High Counselor stepped forward, his expression grave. What exactly are you proposing, Captain Han? Jiwoo nodded to Minho, who expanded the tactical display to show defensive positions throughout Council space. We'll need to establish early warning networks here, here, and here, Minho began, highlighting regions at the edge of Council territory. Then deployment of dimensional anchors at these choke points. Your ships will need to be retrofitted with modified shields, Kim added. Standard energy barriers are useless against the entities. As Minho continued outlining the defense strategy, a quiet alarm sounded from Dr. Choi's datapad. She glanced down, her expression darkening instantly. Captain, she interrupted. Long-range sensors are picking up subspace distortions at the edge of the system. Pattern matches entity movement. The room fell silent. How many? Jiwoo asked, her voice steady. At least 3 distinct signatures, Yuna replied. Larger than any we've encountered before. Jiwoo turned to the council. It seems our timeline has been accelerated. The entities are already here. The council erupted in panic, representatives shouting over each other. But through the chaos, Jiwoo noticed the Varaxian counselor watching her with narrowed eyes. 2. Convenient, he hissed. The humans arrive with warnings of doom, demonstrate their military superiority, and suddenly the threat appears. How do we know you didn't lead them here? Before Jiwoo could respond, the station shuddered. Lights flickered, and for a brief moment, Gravity seemed to waver. That, Jiwoo said grimly, is how you know. The battle lasted 18 hours. 18 hours of desperate fighting, of physics-defying maneuvers, of council ships falling back in disarray while the reckoning held the line. Through it all, Jiwoo stood on the council station's command deck, directing both human and alien forces with the calm efficiency of someone who had faced extinction many times before. When the last entity was finally forced into real space and destroyed, the cost was clear. 14 council vessels lost with all hands, 3 more damaged beyond repair, and even the mighty reckoning bore new scars along its port side where an entity had briefly phased through its shields. Now, 2 days later, Jiwoo stood once again in the council chambers. The room was quieter than before, the surviving representatives subdued by what they had witnessed. Empty seats marked those whose worlds had been too distant to send replacements yet. The formal vote has been tallied, the Tellurian High Counselor announced, his voice carrying the weight of exhaustion. The Galactic Council officially extends its deepest apologies for the exile of humanity. We recognize this as the greatest mistake in our shared history. Jiwoo nodded, accepting the words without visible emotion. The time for anger had long passed. Furthermore, the Tellurian continued, we unanimously offer humanity full council membership with special emergency powers during this crisis. Your technological and tactical expertise has proven invaluable beyond question. A murmur of agreement ran through the chamber. Even the Varaxian counselor, who had been so suspicious before the battle, nodded his scaled head in grudging respect. Jiwoo glanced at her officers, then stepped forward. The council's apology is accepted, she said, but we must respectfully decline your offer of membership. Shocked whispers erupted across the chamber. After everything that had happened, the humans were refusing what many species had waited centuries to achieve? Captain Han, the Tellurian said, confusion evident in all 4 of his eyes. Perhaps I misunderstood. Your people fought for 200 years to survive. You've proven yourselves worthy 100 times over. Why would you decline? Jiwoo allowed, herself a small smile. Because membership implies that the council stands above its members. After what we've seen and experienced, we can no longer accept that arrangement, not for ourselves nor for the future of this galaxy. She nodded to Engineer Kim, who activated a holographic display at the center of the chamber. It showed a new organizational structure, not the traditional council hierarchy, but a circular arrangement with all species, including humans, positioned as equals. We propose the formation of a joint defense initiative, Jiwoo explained. Not as council members, but as equal partners in ensuring the survival of all intelligent life in this galaxy. The Pelleran counselor leaned forward, her delicate features creased with concern. While we appreciate the gesture, Captain, the harsh reality is that most council species simply don't possess the technological capabilities that humanity has developed. Equality sounds noble, but practicality must prevail. Which is why we're offering to share our technology, Kim interjected. All of it, subspace energy taps, dimensional anchor weapons, phase shields, everything we've developed in exile. This announcement caused even greater commotion. Such technology transfer would completely reshape the balance of power throughout known space. Why would you do this? The Varaxian demanded, suspicion still evident in his voice despite the newfound respect. What do humans gain by giving away your advantages? Survival, Jiwoo said simply. The 3 entities we faced were scouts. Their main force is still coming. Without a united front, with every world equipped with adequate defenses, we all lose. Minho stepped forward. Our projections indicate at least 70 major entity clusters approaching galactic central regions. The reckoning alone cannot be everywhere at once. Speaking of which, the Tellurian said, your ship suffered significant damage. Our shipyards stand ready to assist with repairs, though I suspect our technology may be insufficient. Jiwoo exchanged a glance with her. Officers then tapped her communicator. Reckoning initiate protocol revelation. Authorization. Han Jiwoo. Captain's code Omega-37. Acknowledged, Captain, came Officer Song's voice. revealing fleet positions now. The holographic display suddenly expanded, showing not just the local system, but the entirety of Council space. Throughout the map, 15 points of light winked into existence as ships dropped their stealth fields. The Reckoning was never alone, Jiwoo explained to the stunned Council. These are our sister ships, each with capabilities equal to or exceeding the Reckoning's. The Council representatives stared in disbelief. 15 warships of such power, positioned throughout their territory. They had been completely vulnerable without even knowing it. You could have conquered us at any time, the Tellurian whispered. Yes, Jiwoo acknowledged without hesitation. We could have returned with our fleet the moment we developed these technologies. We could have demanded retribution for our exile. Many among us wanted exactly that. Then why didn't you? Asked the Pelleran, genuine curiosity in her voice. Jiwoo's expression softened slightly. Because revenge doesn't protect anyone from what's coming. Because we learned, through blood and sacrifice, that survival requires cooperation, not dominance. She gestured to the hologram, where each human warship was positioned to protect major council population centers. Each of these vessels is commanded by an officer with specific expertise in combating the threats we face. The Vindication, commanded by Admiral Park, specializes in void swarm tactics. The Resilience, under Captain Yoon, has the most advanced entity detection systems we've developed. Together, Minho added, they form humanity's contribution to the Joint Defense Initiative. Equal partners, equal sacrifice. The Tellurian High Counselor seemed overwhelmed. You positioned your fleet to defend our worlds before we even agreed to your proposal? Yes, Jiwoo said simply, because some principles transcend politics. Some threats demand action regardless of historical grievances. A profound silence fell over the chamber as the council representatives contemplated what they were being offered and what it revealed about the species they had once exiled as too unpredictable, too dangerous to be part of their community. Finally, the Tellurian stood. I propose an immediate vote on Captain Han's proposal for a joint defense initiative with humanity as equal partners. All in favor? Every remaining representative raised their hands or appendages without hesitation. Then it is decided, the Tellurian declared. The era of the Galactic Council ends today. The Joint Defense Initiative begins. As the chamber erupted in urgent discussions about implementation and logistics, Jiwoo stepped away from the central platform, joined by her officers. 200 years, Kim said quietly. 200 years of fighting, building, dying in the darkness, and now we're right back where we started. Jiwoo shook her head. No, we're not where we started. We're where we need to be. She looked out. Through the chamber's viewport at the stars beyond, the same stars her ancestors had been forbidden to travel. But these stars now represented not exile, but possibility. Not punishment, but purpose. Humanity will never again be at the mercy of others, she said. But neither will we stand aside and watch others suffer when we have the power to help. That's the true lesson of our exile. The commotion in the council chamber continued as representatives rushed to establish communication with their homeworlds, to prepare their people for both the coming threat and the radical changes to the galactic order. Through it all, Jiwoo and her officers stood apart, watching the beginning of something they had once thought impossible. Do you think it will last? Minho asked quietly. This alliance? This equality? Jiwoo considered the question for a moment, watching his former adversaries now work together with urgent purpose. It will last, she said finally. Because it must. The universe doesn't care about our politics or our pride. It only respects survival. She turned to face her officers, the people who had fought alongside her through humanity's darkest hours, who had never lost faith in their species' capacity to endure and to forgive. Our ancestors were exiled because the Council feared human unpredictability, she said. They were right to fear it, but what they never understood was that adaptability, that unpredictability, is our greatest strength. It's what kept us alive. When everything in the universe tried to kill us. She looked back at the busy council chamber, at the beginning of a new era that would be shaped as much by humanity's influence as by the looming threat. And now, she said with quiet certainty, it's what will keep this galaxy alive.